Welcome. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. I'd rather not do a mic. So welcome, and thank you, Creative Mornings, for being here. Thanks for everyone coming and taking time out of their morning and being here at MADE and joining me in this kind of creative talk here this morning. So I'm excited to kind of be a part of this. I'm going to take care of the little clicker. Thank you. So yeah, I would just like to invite you this morning. This topic is end, right? So when we first got together with Sam, I really didn't know where I would take end. And then when we started talking about having the talk here at this location, something kind of clicked for me. And I just wanted to share today a little bit about my process of creativity and thinking about how I really struggled with this idea of end for me as I went along. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I think I just want to take like 15 seconds and have you guys just think about internally about what the word end means for you. So just take a few seconds of silence and think about what that word end means for you. And then also just go one step further and think about like what was your last end. So envision what that was for you. So just like 10 seconds. Cool. Now I want you to think about the opposite, right? So when you think about a beginning, what does the word beginning mean for you? And similarly, just think about like envision what your last beginning was, and whether it's something that was just something today or this morning, or maybe it was something a little bit more profound. So if you're anything like me, in our first thought about end, a lot of imagery kind of came to mind. Right? It's something of this kind of morbid thought process. Maybe it was something that was as simple as just a project you wanted to get started and it didn't come out as you intended, or maybe it did. But I think largely the word end a lot of times has this baggage with it of death or death, or just kind of this open negativity about something coming to a place of closure, and maybe we're uncomfortable about that closure. And I kind of challenge us today to think a little bit about why we think that is, and why do we think we attach that baggage necessarily to a word or to a process? So, and in reality, I want to give another opportunity to think about like how does end, a lot of times in our lives, we also have ends that are actually really bright, right? So even in religion, right? A lot of times religion, when they talk about, and all kinds of spirituality, they talk about ends being this place of an uplifting light that you're supposed to head towards, right? Or when you finally pay off your student loan, right? That's not like an end that you're thinking that of this negativity around it. It's something that is actually very uplifting, and it allows you to kind of just release all that weight off your shoulders. Or maybe it's something just simple, right? Like getting out the door in the morning. That end is actually just an opening for the next process to start. So we're going to talk a little bit about why does end kind of get a bad rap? So I'd like to take just another second and take the two words that I helped challenge you guys to think about this morning, the beginning and the end, and kind of break those two words down. So in my thought process, the beginning, a lot of times with the word beginning, we have a lot of confidence. And it's scheduled and planned. So a lot of times you can start that sentence of like, yeah, I'm going to begin by taking these steps first, and then I'm going to start there and start next. So a lot of times positivity comes with beginnings, and it's just something that we're excited about. We're excited about sharing with others, and there's just a general sense of positivity around beginnings, and that's great. But then we have ends, right? And ends come with, a lot of times, with surprise, unexpected results, which a lot of times can kind of be translated as chaos. And, again, just another sentence to kind of wrap that idea around it is, I'm not really sure where this will end up. And that brings a level of us being uncomfortable in that space, right? So at the beginning, we're saying, yeah, well, I absolutely do know. I have confidence. I know I'm going to start tomorrow, and I'm going to take these steps. And they say, okay, well, what are you going to do next? Where does this end up? And you're like, I'm not quite sure, right? You have end goals or deadlines or other things that you want to strive towards, but do you actually know where it'll end up? No one really does, right? So there's that kind of sense of uncomfortable feeling about not being able to control where that goes. And what I'd like to say is, like, in my process as kind of growing through my career, I really struggled with this end process, or not being able to control the processes that I was a part of or the teams that I were in and what deliverables were there. And so I, over time, was able to kind of develop a way for myself to open up to being comfortable in chaos. And that really transformed my way of being able to be a part of larger teams and bigger projects and not feel so overburdened by what the end result will be. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And that actually was really, really difficult for me. The reasoning for it is because I am a perfectionist. So as a creative thinker and a perfectionist, like, that pencil being slightly off is totally bothering to me, right? So, and it's kind of a dangerous thing. So it's dangerous because we can get totally wrapped into the details of what that process is, and then we continue to spiral down and down into what will the end result be, and it has to be perfect. It has to be this something that has either been predefined in my own head or predefined by someone else other than me. And again, that just ties back into that ending. What does the ending have to be? And in large part, a lot of times because we don't have the ability to control where our process goes, because it's either a part of a team or other things in our life interrupt, it just becomes chaos. And then we become uncomfortable. And chaos brings anxiety, and anxiety brings frustration, frustration brings depression, all kinds of things, all kinds of negative things. So how can we stop for a moment and think about how to change our perspective about what this chaos is, what the ending result might be, and be able to change our perspective to be able to be more open to seeing those chaotic moments as opportunities to provide new creative solutions and be a part of a process that's not so defined. So this was my route a little bit to process, and I'll talk a little bit, I don't need these anymore, about how I got to here, which is how when Sam and I first started talking about the concept of end, how this whole discussion actually started to make sense was the process of me getting to this space, and even this space made as a business starting, all came out of a series of different ends. And there was a lot of chaoticness in everyone's life, I'm sure, but in my life, I'll talk to you a little bit about what that is. So it all starts off great, right? We went to school, And in school, in my opinion, just a little reflection about design school is reflecting upon it back now, I actually do see why some of my professors chose to, at the time, I was thinking that it was like just trying to be incredibly mean or, but changing deliverables right at the very end. And actually that was preparing us for that chaotic environment and preparing us to realize that, you know, not everything is on this defined schedule where you know what that end result will be. Now you have 2.5 months to get there. School was nice. Furniture, I started right outside of school. I worked with kind of a really, really talented designer in town here, working on developing skills as a furniture designer and making handcrafted furniture. So that's where I really kind of fell in love with, again, outside of school, making things with your hands, craftsmanship, and detail-oriented, things that last forever, blah, 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 blah. And then I transitioned to landing a job at a big design firm. So, and that was really great too. But the further I went along these transitions, more and more chaos started to enter my life. And it wasn't necessarily that it entered my life, it's just that I became a lot more aware that chaos is actually a normal state. It's actually a normal state of mind that a lot of businesses operate in on a daily basis, that people operate in on a daily basis. And that was pretty eye-opening, especially at the big business level. Because on the outside, it totally feels like they have everything together. How can this big firm who has, stores across the world, hundreds of employees, everything has to be run so efficiently and effectively, and then you get there and you realize, it's very, very chaotic. There's lots of chaos in there. Several years at a big design firm, enjoyed my time there, and then spent the kind of next stage of my life settling down, started a family, and really started to see how these ideas of chaos actually started to affect my personal self. So I had a son, he was about 1, and at that point in time, my sister, I did not have cancer. I know cancer is a big word up there, and luckily I did not, but so many of us are actually touched by cancer these days. And I was too, because my sister, who's actually only 3 years older than me, was diagnosed with a pretty aggressive stage of breast cancer, and that just totally flipped my mindset. It totally screwed with my head. Because she was early, 32, and I was 29, and I was thinking, holy crap, I was just envisioning life to be very different. So chaos entered the same time when I had a 1-year-old, and I was working at a big design firm and had big deadlines and lots of pressure. And it was just so much chaos, and then again, I just didn't have control over that. So that chaos totally turned into anxiety. Anxiety turned into frustration. Frustration ended up turning into depression, and I just really, really had a hard time. So I decided that I really just needed a rebalance. I needed something else different in my life, and that's where I kind of took a refocus of what it is that I wanted to do. And thankfully, I actually had a mentor that I was able to go to and talk a lot about this idea of accepting chaos. So, and we've touched upon that a little bit today already. But the idea, in large part, is just being able to be in the moment and think about how, again, chaos is a normal state. It's just something that happens and is actually not something you can control. And the more time and energy that you put into trying to control and divert that chaos to something else can just be wasted energy. So and when you open yourself up to thinking about how those are actually opportunities to find creative ways out of that predicament or solution, or new team members, or all different kinds of things. You start redefining the words and the vocabulary that you use in your life. And that vocabulary redefines what your mental state and well-being actually ends up being. And not that the chaos has disappeared, it's always still there. It's just changing your mental perspective of how to accept it and then be able to move through it. And once I started doing that, I immediately started seeing new openings and to my creative process, new openings into different things that I wanted to do with my life, and ultimately landed me a new job. So I found a new job, I found a new community, and a new outlook on what it is that I wanted to do. And largely, that was a start or a step in the process of becoming a part of MADE. MADE was a byproduct of another job that I got just before it. And we'll talk about the process of that happening here next. That business was called TechShop. TechShop is a international company, actually, that largely, in my opinion, put the idea of makerspaces on a much, much higher level than they had ever been thought about before, or even just in a broader sphere, a public sphere. Makerspaces, if you don't know what one is, you're in one. So after the show, you'll be able to see that it's essentially a community and an environment that is open to learning and the creative process. So that is a pretty broad range, broad brush to apply to a makerspace, and that's intentional. But TechShop really defined what it could be at a much higher level, and they did a really, really good job at it, in my opinion, actually. So they started a few locations in California, and pretty quickly actually grew into several more locations, and then more and more. And what a lot of people don't realize is one of their largest struggles was actually geography. So those locations were actually spread across not only the US, but actually the world. And for a business that is pretty young, only 10 years old from start to finish, they actually did end up closing, so there is an ending there. But they had 9,000 current members, including opening a location here in St. Louis, which was open for 18 months and had a total of 500 members. So my new job was to take TechShop, open it here in St. Louis with a really talented team of other creative people, and start to develop a community, or really gather a community, not necessarily develop a community, because the community was here, in my opinion. It was just a place for them to go and start to share that journey with each other. And that was a really fun and exciting time. It was a really big company that, again, on the outside looking in, they had so many things that were going right? So everything looked like, how could they possibly open up all these different locations across the US? They have so much equipment, how could they afford all that? They must be doing something right. And then you get in the door, and even as members, a lot of people really had really great experiences there. And it was just, we were all kind of blindsided by the idea that this company actually did, on a very daily basis, live in a very chaotic environment. And ultimately, that chaos drew them to a close. So we'll talk a little bit about that day when it closed, or the process. We actually ended up doing really well. Those first 18 months, we were really kind of just starting to take flight, or take off as a business, as a community. We had kind of grown to a size that made a whole lot of sense for our community. And we really felt like we were just getting started, which is true, because it was about 18 months in. And it was about Thanksgiving time or so. It was about end of November. And so the holidays were coming around the corner, and everybody was kind of starting to prepare within the maker community for those holidays and be able to design and make things for sale during the holiday community. And so it's Thanksgiving week. My wife actually is out of town, and I've got 2 kids now, and one is 3 years old. And of course, you know, we're morning routine. It's about 6:45, and you know, she has she's kind of going through potty training, and she decides like, okay, you know, I need to go to the restroom, and there's an issue there. So, wife is out of town. I've got a young kid out and eating cereal, hopefully, and another one in the bathroom, and I'm kind of helping her along. And I get a text message. The text message read, you know, call me right away, and it was from our manager, our general manager at Tech Shop. So I called him, you know, trying to do multiple things as dad on duty, and realized that Tech Shop had closed. So they had filed bankruptcy, and that it was defunct and no longer a business. This was a pretty big surprise, as you might believe, and ended up that was actually the bigger bomb that went off in that bathroom that morning. So it really kind of took me by surprise, and that general manager, Mike, and the greatness of his heart, really said, you know, I really need to reach out to our employees. I know they start a shift in about an hour and a half. Can you start calling them and letting them know? I was like, yeah, I can totally stop what I'm doing right now. Get my kids to school, make sure that they're clothed and have breakfast and get them to school, and call my employees and let them know that they don't have a job anymore within the next hour and a half. Sure, no problem. So it was actually a pretty busy morning. So got that, and but I tried to reflect in the moment and think about, you know, it's not the end all, right? So I have to accept this chaos and be able to show up. And even though the business was closing, we asked a few employees to come and kind of be a part of telling the community that this had all happened. So as they showed up to start making things that day, the announcement went out to all of its members at 8 a.m. that morning, and including the employees. So employees got about a 45-minute heads up. Went to work that day, obviously a little down on spirits. Talked a little bit to our members as they showed up, but overwhelmingly our members, although they were surprised and had immediate emotional reactions, which was totally given, the majority of them, upon just a short period of time or even in the moment, was just saying like, don't worry about it, this is probably just an ending that is an opening to a new beginning, right? So I found that to be really, really inspiring as kind of a revolving door, right? So this community had already started. This community had already started to be brought together, and just because of this singular closure doesn't mean that it's a closure on this community. I thought that was really super inspiring. Very, very quickly, some ideas actually started to generate and form about where does this community go next. And luckily, there are 2 individuals who are the founders of Made here that really stepped up. So within 24 hours, one of those individuals is named Jim McKelvey. Jim McKelvey is the founder of Square, which is the card reader device. But he's actually, his story about prototyping that Square device is actually very well known by the Tech Shop crew, because he prototyped and developed his Square at a tech shop in Menlo Park. So it was a story that we told over and over and over and over again during tours, as people came through and saying, oh, you can do this thing and develop this little piece of technology and it can totally change your life. See this individual, he did it, and he's from St. Louis, which was another great thing. He also had an ongoing relationship with another really big business development engine here in town, Cortex. So he quickly called Cortex and said, like, what is going on? That's where Tech Shop was located. And is there anything I can do? And within 24 hours, they essentially had an agreement that said that Jim would step into the role of starting to pay the existing lease on all the equipment that you will see later today or was at Tech Shop, which was the major defining factor between our location and many other locations. Actually, all the other locations. All the other locations, the equipment was actually owned by Tech Shop. And St. Louis location, it was not owned by Tech Shop, it was owned by Cortex. So, and Tech Shop was paying a lease, our very favorable one at first, actually nothing for the first 6 months, and then very, very small for that very first year, and they were just actually starting to actually make payments on that lease. Within 24 hours, there was beginnings discussions of what this could still be in St. Louis, and brought in really the man behind the doing aspect of both Made here, but also Third Degree Glass, who's across the street, is Doug Auer. So he's the other founder here at Made, and had no idea, quite frankly, of who these people are necessarily. I didn't know what Jim looked like, so the day after the closure, we're kind of still packing things away, answering phone calls, telling people can pick up their things or they can't pick up their things during certain specific hours. And there's these kind of rumblings of private meetings going on in back rooms, and it's all very mysterious until actually Emily, who's here today, and I were kind of pulled into this idea of what was going on. And the idea was to kind of start this new, but start in just the St. Louis location and kind of rethink about what a makerspace community could really be. And ultimately that defined what Made was. So in December, so again, if we think back just a few moments before, so it was Thanksgiving week, Tech Shop closes, we reopen in the same location under a new name in December. So it was very, very, very quick that we were able to open a new business and re-invite those same people in and kind of finish up the projects that they were so abruptly finished or had to finish on or end on. So we were open during the month of December, allowed people to kind of make their final projects, and then officially closed in December, which is the same time we bought this building. This building in no way or shape or form did it look like it is today. It was one of the lesser expensive buildings on the block, and got a really great deal on it. And a lot of that is due to the kind of dilapidated state of which it was left in. So quickly we moved, in January we moved all the equipment to the building here and moved out of the Cortex location. And with Cortex's help and guidance, and started thinking about what this new community could be. Brought all the equipment upstairs, and a small group of us from Tech Shop was kind of tasked to not only start to envision about what this space could be, but what the business could be, and what the community looked like, and how can we offer that again. So we spent a year redeveloping this building, or close to a year, with the first few months, January, February, being suited up in rain gear and literally power washing every square inch of the building. So for 2 months, literally 8 hours a day, just power washing. And a lot of grunt labor and just passion. We were all super excited about it, super excited about getting into something new, and kind of, again, this ending, kind of wrap around the idea, it really started something new for us. So we were able to kind of shape and take all those very chaotic moments of starting a business within Tech Shop, getting things up and operational, closing and then reopening, and being able to see all that as actually a positive path to a new business. So today, I invite you to kind of think a little bit again, reflect on what your last end was, what that term or word means to you, and be encouraged to kind of be able to step out of the box of the baggage that typically that word or other words in your own vocabulary that might attach to it, right? And be able to accept chaos and be able to change your own perspective and be able to be open to more creative opportunities. So, that's it.